feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer.
I don't care what you think about what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the Cowboys.
Call this college rule.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. Chris and Dom here. We're just a couple of local comics talking about sports who enjoy cracking jokes and having a good time. Before we begin this podcast, I'd like to say we record here at Engle Studio, downtown Tucson, and they're here for all your audio needs. And we're in the midst of a fathers and sons block, Chris.
That's right. We're kind of getting to the end of this because we have been going on and on. I really like this one. Two guys, two different sports, and a little bit of hatred between them. We're talking first about Ken Norton Sr.
Ken Norton Sr., the boxer, Norton Sr.
One of the best heavyweight boxers.
He kind of had Muhammad Ali's number. Anybody in Muhammad Ali's career who could go toe-to-toe and give him fits, it's this guy.
Well, if you watch this fight that he ends up beating him, and we'll bring it up over and over, they were talking about, they were like, he really wasn't dominated at this point in his career like that.
Yeah.
And people weren't giving it up to Norton. They were like kind of being like, oh, Ali's lost it. And then you watch that and you're like, no. Norton was so on it with his strategy, with all of it.
Somebody always has somebody's number, no matter what it is. And he seemed to have Ali's number, and he fought some fantastic opponents, which we'll get into. So let's jump right in, Chris. Kenneth Howard Norton Sr., born August 9th, 1943 in Jacksonville, Illinois. Small farming community of about 20,000 people, the only child to John, a fire department engineer, and Ruth, a hospital therapist. And he was a very athletic child growing up.
And just an outstanding athlete. So, and we talk about some of these guys who are just above everybody else as an athlete. Like literally they could do anything.
Yeah.
And that's what Ken was. And we see this because, I mean, he's starts and he plays all of the sports, but he really excels in track,
Which is crazy to think, yeah.
and he excels in it in such a
Dominant way?
well, he's so over athletic, he's so more athletic than everybody else that he literally does 8 different events.
Yeah, I mean, by the second grade, he had already won 5 events at a junior track meet. He had discussed how sometimes I think it all came too easily for me. When you're always bigger and faster and stronger than everyone else, there's never anybody to push you. You never realize how good you can become. That's like ridiculous.
But that's in his second grade.
Yeah.
That's why he was so much more developed. And
as a freshman in high school, he was 5'11", 156 already.
And that they were saying it was just like, yeah, that was all muscle too. You know, when those guys in high school, you're like, how are you this ripped?
And he was like the Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson training regimen. He's like, I didn't lift weights until I was done being a professional athlete.
Seriously though, and it's those body types too.
There's a reason they nicknamed him Black Hercules. Hercules. But anyway, he excelled in football, basketball, and track. By his senior year, he was 6'3", 198 pounds. At one track meet, he entered 8 events on a lark. Just like, I'll just do 8. I don't care. Where one would physically tire a normal person. And he won 5 and finished second in 3.
In 3, yes. And then the state of Illinois actually made a rule called the Norton Rule where you can't enter more than 4 events.
So give the other white children a chance. They should have just named it that rule.
It's like, no. You can win on 4 events, but then you can't shot put. We're trying to keep shot put.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it a gentleman's game, Chris, because man of their time in rural Illinois.
Which is kind of ridiculous to think that somebody couldn't literally enter any event that they want because you're like, nah, you're winning too much.
Well, beforehand, they were probably like, no one's going to enter more than like 3, if you think about it. And that would be like a super freak athlete, and then along comes Kenny Norton with that dick-swinging energy.
And this is where I feel like this was in the times where he would have became a professional athlete, but he ends up joining the military.
Well, yeah. So I wanted to bring this up. He had also played football. He dominated in football.
Yes,
I
forgot about that.
86 college scholarships. I should note that in one of the track seasons, though, he scored a state record 288 individual points. That's ridiculous. But he's got the 86 college scholarships. And then he decided to stay close to home instead of pursuing football kind of like college professionally. I believe it was Northeast Missouri State.
Which, I mean, they don't have, I don't even know if they're a Division I.
Probably not.
You know what I mean? So that's, looking at this, he was such a highly, sought after, athlete, and he literally was just like, nah, I think I'm done with athletics. Kind of, that was the feeling that I saw that I thought was so
because when he gets to college, because he wants to stay close to home, he was too obsessed with chasing girls and being, around his kind of bubble where he's, big fish in a small pond. His freshman season, he breaks his collarbone 2 weeks before the season starts in a fist fight with a man who tries to run him down with his car. With his goddamn car, but Black Hercules gets up. His second year, he just said, screw it, and he joins the Marines. He, of all the branches to join, specifically when a little conflict in Southeast Asia is going on, probably not the best of choices, but...
I thought it was interesting. It almost seems like he wanted... action. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to do something with his life, because he said he didn't want to go back to Jacksonville. He said he was afraid of just becoming a teacher with no real advancements for blacks in his particular community.
Yeah.
So he was actually enjoyed the military because it said the Corps taught me to be black and proud and made me a man.
And we see he brought this up later on where he was talking about the regiment of it helped him train and all of that just being essentially getting the discipline of a pro athlete, because I feel like right after high school he was everybody was you're the star, and he kind of was just I don't care. And then he went to the military and it got that hunger in him.
I bet you could suck a golf ball through a garden hose, Norton. Only thing they got in Jacksonville. Anyway, he trained as a radio man at Camp Lejeune. He joined the football team there.
Yep.
Was a left halfback, but a white officer also was a left halfback, so he didn't get to play much. And at the urging of a friend, he joined the boxing squad.
Well, I saw that, and I was wondering if there was a talk with him and his friend, and they're just yeah, but if you box, nobody's ever going to be taking your spot.
It's one-on-one, and you can beat the hell out of anyone you see fit.
They're literally not going to be well, we got this white fighter, so you're going to have to take a seat. It's and that I bet was the appeal, because the ridiculous of that, I bet he was so much better than that other guy.
Well, I know, but the thing is when he first started, he wasn't even Homer Simpson fighting hobos on his way to the top. He was so self-conscious because every other sport came so naturally to him. He would train by himself. He wouldn't train with the team. He would shadow box by himself. He would run and jump rope by himself because he didn't want to show people any weakness. He was very self-conscious, which is kind of a weird psychological thing for a star like that. But
everything else came so natural that this wasn't. And I bet that was another thing that must have been really fun, where you're just I'm going to learn this.
Yeah, I'm going to learn it and then unleash hell upon earth.
And then he becomes... what I read, which I loved, he became the greatest boxing Marine ever.
Yeah.
So
he had no
was
coach.
That's great. No.
The coach died. He died in a bus accident.
So his whole, during the Marines, it was literally him training himself, which I thought was so awesome.
And he would go to the practices and he would go to the events. Even if he wasn't participating, he would watch, he would absorb, he would learn.
Well, this is before you could watch film on everybody. So literally that's all you could do.
So he was a 3-time All-Marine champion, and in 1967 he wins the Pan American trials. But they decided to take another heavyweight because of their international experience, or should I say, international experience. So he never boxed as an amateur again.
Yep.
So when he leaves the Marines, he is approached by Art Rivkin, a San Diego Coca-Cola distributor who refereed some of his service fights while he was in the Marines. He offered him to pay him $100 a week and take part of his purses for basically being his manager.
Yeah, so this is when he steps in and he gets a manager, and this is where, and I bet it was kind of up in the air where he was just no, I'm a great boxer in the Marines. Is this going to go forward?
Yeah.
And this guy was just yes, you are that good to become a professional.
Don't have a lot of money, and then because of the fear of returning home to Jacksonville, because he does have a son at this point, also named Kenny, he does not, he just says, screw it, I'll do it, even though he's struggling. And while living in San Diego, he's actually training in L.A. And he had talked about how hard it was to raise, because he's a single dad, essentially, and the community kind of helped raise Kenny while he was away. And he had said, sometimes I would stay up in L.A. and not come home, basically because I knew he'd get fed by everyone watching him. Yeah. And really, really struggled. He has Eddie Futch, who was his new trainer, who also trained Joe Frazier.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty interesting. I kind of wish there was a Frazier-Norton fight.
And they had kind of similar styles when they went up against Ali, and you could tell like that was like on purpose, and yeah.
All I think of is, whenever I think of Joe Frazier, I just think of Bill Burr's Philadelphia rant. You got a statue to a fake Italian boxer, and you don't have one for Joe Frazier. 7 minutes! He makes his pro debut on November 14th, 1967. He wins his first 16 fights, all by knockouts, and by July 2nd, 1972, he ends up being knocked out by Jose Luis.
Yep.
And
which was everybody thought that he was on this ascension of beating like all of the, because in this like time in guys' careers, they kind of put like journeymen up against them. They put guys who are like obviously not going to win. Yes. Yeah. And that's what people thought this was, and he ended up losing against Jose, and then that was like one of these things that you look at later, because he ended up taking a fight with him later on.
And then he knocked him out.
And he dominated him. You were just like, oh, he wanted that.
Yeah. He wins his next 13 in a row, and his managers were kind of, trying to get him the fight. They were kind of sick of because they couldn't pay him a bunch of money, and they couldn't get these fights against better opponents. But we'll see that isn't the case. Still poor, and he's 30-1. He actually at this point had asked his dad to send him some money, and he said if that happened, he would have ended up going home.
I saw that. It was like in 72. And it's crazy to think that he's 30-1. He's getting paid a little bit, but he's making money off purses, and he's still
struggling to feed his kid.
Unbelievably broke. And you're just like, oh, geez, it must be rough because there must be just a huge gap between Frazier and,
And his dad had told him to finish this. Because this is not a starter career. This is a finisher career. It's not a starter car. He was so desperate, like I had said, he was having basically neighbors and friends and everybody else helping out with raising Kenny. His new manager, Bob Byron, a businessman from San Diego, is trying to get Norton better fights. He got a book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich, which really kind of changed his mindset as far as being able to take that next step in boxing.
Well, I don't know if you've ever read that book, but it's all about positive mental attitude.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of what he was talking about, where...
Making a wish board, Chris?
Well, it was very much... He said it kind of changed his mindset, where he would go into fights not like being like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
More being like, I'm going to win. And he ends up... I thought it was interesting. He ends up having like... private instruction by this guy Napoleon Hill, who
that's pretty cool.
Taught him how to like invest his money and like a bunch of shit like that, because he talks about it because he was struggling so hard at this point, and he goes, I got this book, and it was like everything turned around, and he acknowledges he was just like, well, it wasn't like the book did it. I'm saying like it was like perfect timing.
I had to do it, but the book gave me a roadmap of what to do and how to conduct myself.
And he said it was like perfect timing for him to like read this and like inspire him to get the confidence to go on.
Yeah, so he's training with Joe Frazier because he has a fight coming up on March 31st, 1973. A very big fight.
And a lot of people, so this is what we started the episode with. This is the Ali fight, and a lot of people thought that he was a tomato can, that Ali was going to come back and walk through. And I thought that was so not disrespectful to Norton because he hadn't really earned it, but like
he was just unknown.
Once you get into that fight and you watch it, and you're just like, oh, this is like dominated.
Well, he has, and we'll get into kind of how strategically he fought later when we talk about his style, but it was kind of a perfect matchup for somebody like Muhammad Ali. Ali was a 1-5 favorite in this fight. Howard Cosell, this is taking place in San Diego. He's broadcasting it for ABC, called it the worst mismatch in boxing history. But it really is the other way.
And we see it right away. So what with Ali does is he creates distance with his jab.
Yeah.
And what they found by watching tape is he drops his right as soon as he starts to throw his jab.
Yeah.
So
because he keeps his right down here, or his left up here, or left down here and right up here.
And what Norton and his trainer and I bet Frazier were saying was, don't try and dodge his jab. Try and beat it.
Exactly.
And he literally, if you watch those first 2 rounds, it's almost like Ali doesn't know what's happening because he's just like, he keeps going for a jab and he keeps eating a jab. And you're just like, I don't think that's ever happened to him in his entire life.
And in the second round, Norton breaks his jaw.
Yep.
Which is crazy. And Ali has to fight defensively at this point.
And it changes the whole fight, which it almost looks like late in these like 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds, Ali actually kind of finds his rhythm and he starts bouncing around the ring. And the thing that somebody said, they said Norton might be the hardest body punching heavyweight because if you watch this, he ruins his ribs essentially, and then he pretty much stops jumping around the ring.
Well, because of that style, he can throw, because he's not necessarily the hardest puncher, but he can throw so many in succession.
Yep.
And you just chopping that wood, man.
Well, and they were saying he had an ability of throwing unconventional combos that were like really great, so you wouldn't see it coming.
Exactly. Like, I haven't seen this on tape before or boxed anybody who does this.
Yep. I bet it was that they hadn't boxed anybody that had that kind of weird, because he really would throw like you really got to watch it because they would like dodge each other, and he would jump back in, and like it really is an interesting fight. And the audience of it is like, you could tell everyone's like, oh shit, Ali's gonna lose this fight.
Is this happening?
Yes, it was very much that feeling of Ali's career was done.
So he wins the decision in 12 rounds. After the fight, Howard Cosell said to him, "Kenny, you made me look silly." And then Norton, who was always good as far as maybe not James Toney, but the quick retort was great. He said, "That's okay, Howard. You always look silly."
I love it.
It was only Ali's second loss of his career, and it was for the NABF heavyweight title. So Kenny Norton is a heavyweight champion at basically 30 years old, which is insane to think.
Well, it's insane to essentially be where he was in 72.
He was in the Marines for a
and now in 73. So he was like, I might have to end this, and now he's the world champion.
I wonder if his son was watching it with a robot like in Rocky IV. What about Paulie? He's having sex with the robot.
I heard this story, and I thought it was so great for Ali. Frazier's manager went to Ali, said, "We don't want you to take a rematch with Norton. We want you to hold off for a year, and then we'll have a giant match with Frazier."
Yeah.
And he said, "Fuck no, we're going to do a rematch." And
that's amazing.
It really was one of those things where you're just like, that's like, I love every single part of that.
Right? Like, but that just speaks to the guy's character.
Yep.
And that speaks to his determination and being like, this isn't going to happen again.
Yep.
So they set up the rematch. It's actually later that year, September 10th, 1973, at the Great Western Forum there in Englewood, L.A. And in this fight, though, Norton comes in, and he's lighter. He's lighter than his, 211 frame. He's down to about 206. And what people have talked about in this fight, which all the Ali-Norton fights were amazing.
Yes.
But is he was so dead set on defending his title against Ali that he might have overtrained. He might have gotten in the gym too much, and he almost overexhausted himself.
Yes, so we see this where there's a little bit of power taken off of his punches, and Ali just kind of does. If you watch this fight as opposed to the first fight, you can kind of see Ali has more of a strategy for him.
Yes.
He understands what it needs to be.
But it's back and forth, and Kenny's giving him fits.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it is a split decision, but Ali does come out on top. But at that point, Norton had kind of shown the boxing world from that first fight where Cosell called it a mismatch. It's like, no. This guy's a legitimate heavyweight.
Well, and then I saw something where people were talking about Ali should have won unanimously or Norton should have won unanimously. And that's the thing about boxing is...
Elias and I, we had talked about it, you and me and him.
It really comes down to just a weird thing where you're like, yeah, either one of those guys could have won that fight or could have been the winner of that fight. I think Ali won this second one. We're going to get into the third one with that one.
Yeah, but we got to go.
But he has some other
big fights
now.
in between. Yeah, in 1974 on March 26th, he has a fight with George Foreman
in Venezuela,
Caracas. But this is a fight where Foreman kind of has Norton's number. As far as it only lasts 2 rounds and he gets knocked out by an uppercut like a minute into the second round.
Well, if you watch because it is like a back and forth because they are fucking heavy hitters, but he rips him with an uppercut and he never gets his feet underneath him after that.
No.
It's literally like that should have been a knockout for anybody else.
He's going to die on his feet.
Yeah, exactly.
The fan man. No, but I should note that losing to George Foreman without him hitting you with a grill is still okay.
It is.
It's still okay. Then he reels off 7 straight wins. He got back, actually, his NABF heavyweight title when he beats Jerry Quarry in
5th round.
1975 at Madison Square Garden. Fights Jose Luis Garcia again in 75 and knocks his... He was just like dead set, like, this guy ruined my perfect record.
Well, that's kind of what people were saying was he wanted to dominate him too, and he ends up beating him in 5 rounds. And if you watch that, you're like, oh, yeah, he wanted to... Sometimes guys will box for... like they're like, this is going to go 10. He literally was like, this needs to end now.
Well, we talked about it in that Tony episode where he would just fight his style all the time when there were some fights where he should have just gone and been like, I'm knocking you out.
Yeah, no, seriously.
So because of, reeling off these 7 straight wins, he gets a chance to regain his title and fight Ali for a 3rd time on September 28th, 1976 at Yankee Stadium.
I didn't know that they did boxing at Yankee Stadium.
It's cool, though.
That would be fucking awesome.
Oh, man. It's better than the Beatles at Shea.
Yeah.
Because that's Shea. And the Mets. So he fights him at Yankee Stadium. This was another back and forth affair.
All of them were. Well, actually, no. The first one was totally Norton. These 2 where they really know each other are completely back and forth and split decisions.
They're playing Vince DiColla's War in the background. No. So entering the final round, actually, the judges had Norton ahead.
Yeah.
On all of their scorecards. Unfortunately, it ends in a decision and very disputed outcome, Chris. Very disputed outcome. A lot of people think Norton got jobbed. The UPI unofficial scorecard had him winning 8-7, and the AP's guy had it scored 8-7 as well.
And I saw somebody else had it 8-6-1 for Ali, and everybody was just like, no, that's not. I did see this. It was a bit of a bummer after this 3rd Ali fight. His quote, like looking back on his career, said, that was the last fight that I was fully motivated for because I felt like I had won and they took it away from me, which is such a bummer. Because
I know, man.
He still has some really great fights after this, but like he should have won that Ali fight. He should there's kind of shit that should have happened.
Any sport with judges, you're just kind of like, is this on the level? Or I'm not saying it wasn't, but you're just like, kind of angering. Gets back to fighting, beats Dwayne Bobic, Lorenzo Zanon, and Jimmy Young, who was the number 2 contender actually at the time, in a 15-round split decision. He was actually supposed to fight Ali again, but he had lost his title to Leon Spinks, who chose to fight Ali instead for a second time. So the WBC title gets split because Norton beat Young, and instead of fighting Ali again, he draws Larry Holmes, who, fantastic fighter. This is kind of the beginning of his career and his reign as heavyweight king shit.
Well, I find it weird because the WBC said, hey, Spinks, we want you to fight this number 1 contender. We literally have this set up. And he was just like, nah, I'm going to fight Ali again. And you're just kind of like, yeah, I mean, that's a bigger fight, but come on, we have this set up. So they award him a title, split the title. That's why, if you ever look at, you're just like, why are there 18 championships in boxing? This is why.
They just keep having it.
Yeah. And then he goes on to this Larry Holmes, essentially, war. And
Yeah, dude, it's nuts.
if you watch his fights, they are fucking wars. They're not, he really was an entertaining fighter. And I'll say this.
Fighting like a Marine, man. Teufelhund and Devil Dog, man.
There's two points in boxing where heavyweights were like unbelievable, and there was just a shit ton of great ones, and that's the 70s and the 90s.
Yep.
And it's just those two eras you can look at and just be like, those were the best fights.
Yeah. Oh, totally. So they fight on June 9th, 1978, and this is a 15-rounder.
Yep.
This is, like you said, it's an all-out war. And by the end of it, it leads to a very split and I shouldn't say controversial, but it's an interesting decision.
And it's another split. They did vote that this was one of the biggest, I think it was like top 10 in controversial outcomes, but it was also top 5 in greatest ending rounds.
Yeah.
So that's what they were saying. They were just like, yeah, we didn't know who won, but goddamn, was that a good fight.
Leaving it all out there in the ring for both of them.
Yep.
Two judges scored 143-142 for Holmes, and then the 143-142 for Norton. And yeah, one of the most exciting fights in boxing history there at Caesar's Palace in Vegas, but unfortunately, wouldn't it have been crazy, like an alternate universe where Norton wins this fight? Does he have a fourth fight against Ali, or does he fight Spinks? Like, that'd be nuts, dude.
Yeah, no, seriously, this could have changed. And that's the thing. He had 2 fights that really should have kind of changed his trajectory to be a champion. Like, this is, I mean, he was a champion going into this, I'm saying. And then that would have been like even bigger fights. So, yeah, maybe we would have got that Frazier one if he won.
Oh, man.
Because Frazier was kind of getting at his tail end, so.
Yep, so he has some other fights here coming up. Yeah,
I did see, though, Holmes goes on, and this is kind of where, this is what I mean, where the 70s kind of like, Holmes goes on and is the champ for, I think, the 3rd longest reign.
Most of the 80s, basically, until a certain high-talking man shows up.
Well, and they were saying, they were just like, yeah, the division just kind of emptied out. And Holmes was great. Nobody's talking shit on his ability. I'm just saying, like, there was that time where it was like, oh, now Ali's the champ. Oh, now Frazier's the champ. Norton's the champ. Like, it really was like the 70s was like, who's going to win?
Exactly.
Yeah, so this is where his career starts to peter off.
Gets a draw against Scott LaRue. In that fight, Norton injured his thumb. A thumb in his right eye got him injured. He retired after that, but he fought Randall Tex Cobb.
Now, I want to talk about the old Randall Tex Cobb. You know who this is? He was in Ace Ventura.
Oh, my God.
And he opens the door, and he has the little dog, and he goes, oogie boo. Oogie boo boo doo doo. That's literally who this guy is. And he was
That's fine. I can finish the rest.
And he literally was what they said Homer Simpson was, where you couldn't knock him out.
Yep.
And you just take punishment over and over and over.
Maybe punching's not your thing, Homer.
And after this fight, Norton said that he was done.
But he wanted to come back and show that he had some stuff. Again, because he fights Jerry Cooney, the Great White Hope.
Yep.
May 11th, 1981. And he just basically gets his ass beat.
Well,
which is sad.
It was. And that was the thing that you could tell on these fights. And we see this with guys right at the end where they take one too many fights where you're just like, you shouldn't have taken that one. Because he destroys him, and he kind of says it where he's just like, yeah, that was stupid.
54 seconds in the first round, and then that was his last fight as a professional. Finished his career with a 42-7-1 record. Heavyweight champion, which you can't take that away from him.
Especially in the 70s.
I know.
He beat Ali. Should have beat him twice.
1977, named the world's greatest dad, which all it makes me think of is that shirt in Seinfeld.
Yep.
By the LA
you think you're the world's greatest dad?
Mandelbaum. Oh, Chris, I love your knowledge of Seinfeld. He had actually said one of the best titles that the best title I've ever been named is Best Dad.
Yep.
And because he was a single dad raising Kenny, getting help from the Takes a Village community, and molded him, as we'll discuss in our next episode, into quite the professional.
And he said that for a lot of the time, it was really him and his son, Junior, Kenny, and they were like the only two because that was like their whole family. And this comes up later when his son becomes a professional football player that they actually have a riff, and we'll talk about that. He says it was just like that was one of the hardest times in my life.
Oh, yeah. And we'll talk about his style for a little bit.
Oh, yes.
I think that's important. I brought it up before with Ali, but he was a forward-pressing fighter. He had the crab cross-arm defense, which we were discussing, how that lent itself to kind of giving Ali some problems because his left arm was around his torso to kind of take those jabs, and then his right was by his face, so he doesn't get his ass knocked out.
And he had the ability, when blocking this, he had the ability to counter with some really ridiculous hooks.
Yep.
Either to the body or to the face. And that was something that they were saying was just like, yeah, if you look at Frazier's hooks, if you look, you know what I mean? Like that was a thing that had to have been like, no, this is your counter that's going to ruin
That's
people.
going to destroy people.
Yeah.
But when you're 6'3", 211 pounds, you are Black Hercules.
That's true.
Also in some movies, too. 1975 Mandingo, which was basically the first Django Unchained. Also in the 1998 film Dirty Work, in a laced brownie hallucination knocking out Gary Coleman. Together we burn!
It's one of the best scenes. For us, we love that movie so much. I think I got an itch.
I think I feel a slight itch.
Note to self, Sam looked.
No, I didn't. I was just making sure that they're real. He did in 1986, though, have a horrendous car accident. Did you read anything about
I did see that.
Where a normal person would have died. He went basically off an on-ramp, and they had to take the jaws of life. He fractured his skull, had a brain injury, broke his jaw, ribs, and legs, and somehow emerged alive.
Well, I saw this, and somebody said something like, oh, yeah, that was a boxer's head. That's why he was able to take all those punches, because a normal person's head would have been squished like a melon. You're just like, yeah, all right.
There would be the head would cease to be.
Yes.
1989 World Boxing Hall of Fame, 92 International Boxing Hall of Fame, 2004 U.S. Marine Corps Sports Hall of Fame.
Which I like that one, I think, the most, because he really was, and forever will be, the greatest Marine that has boxed.
It's where he learned to box.
Yep.
2008 World Boxing Council Hall of Fame, and the 2001 San Diego Hall of Champions, 2011 California Sports Hall of Fame. So he's got all of these accolades, just an amazing fighter. And then towards talk about the end, basically, he had been having some health problems after a series of strokes, dies on September 18th, 2013. George Foreman said had nothing but kind words to say about him, and Holmes even said that was like the hardest fight of his entire career.
I thought that might have been one of the best things because, like we were saying, his fights were wars, and Holmes said that was the hardest fight that I was ever in.
Foreman said he was the fairest of them all.
That too. It was 15 rounds. Yeah, no, great guy, unbelievable boxer. Stay tuned. So stay tuned for his son coming up next.